So, welcome to Wisdom and Productivity, the podcast of Dr. Efraín Martin. Oh, because we're going live. Okay. Podcast of Dr. Efraín Martinez. I'm here with the authors of Pencils Down, Michael Beyer and Nallely Suárez Gass. How are you guys doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm so excited to be here with you guys celebrating the release of your new book.
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
Cheers. Salud.
Cheers, salud, boom. Here's the school principal. Excited to learn more about this journey, about writing this book, knowing about you. So let's start with you, Nayeli. What should the public know about Nayeli Suarez Gass?
One, they should know that I was born and raised in Chicago. My family is from Mexico. I have always been very adamant about doing a million things, trying a different job. I had a very successful career in consumer packaged goods and food goods. And then I left one day to coach others in their careers. I found the majority of my satisfaction came when I saw others win, when I saw people advance their careers and find happiness. And so I decided to make that my full time passion.
So I'm wondering, Nayeli, who coached you that inspired you to become a coach yourself?
It's not one person. It's a compilation of everybody. I think about like my aunts and uncles who helped me do my homework when I was a little girl. I think about, my teacher, Mr. Green and Miss Dean in high school that were such a big influence. And I actually got a C in Miss Dean's class, but she was so influential in just shaping and forming us. That was freshman year. And then since then, I've always felt like I've had, I don't know if you want to say like a guardian angel or a mentor, but there was always people wherever I went who were, offering advice or willing to lend a hand. And so to say like one person shaped my life would be completely erroneous. It is a compilation. I am a compilation of everyone that I've worked with or met.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. Michael Beyer, what should we know about you?
It's hard to follow up with this. You're such a natural speaker. What do you want to know?
What's your origin story?
Origin story. Goodness.
Yeah, when were you bitten by the spider?
Grew up in Woodstock, Illinois, northwest of Chicago. Fled there right after high school. Studied art at UT Austin. Dropped out because not a good idea to study art on student loans. Joined the Air Force. Went overseas for a few years. Came back. Grad school, art history, UIC. Realized again, art not a great fit for me, so I went into teaching because I want to make a difference, right? I want to make a difference, but I also wanted a stable job, right? I came from lower middle class, wanted a stable job, so I went into teaching to make a difference and a job, and taught for 5 years, far south side, Alcott Gardens, Humboldt Park, and then I realized, one reason why teachers can't, they're frustrated is because of the leadership, right? And so I found a program at UIC that fast tracked me to being a principal. And I became a principal. I worked in central office for a year, but then I led a school on the southwest side, did wonderfully there. But I got frustrated with the poverty and just dealing with all of that, right? You feel like your system is pushing the rock up the hill. And so I said, I want to try it on the other side of the tracks. And I went to Ogden, which is, if you're from Chicago, Ogden, one of those affluent schools, and went there and did some good things as best as we could. But I got pushed out for various reasons, and it was kind of tragic because my family depended on it, and I found myself out of a job. And so what am I going to do? And so long story short, we got connected because I wanted to go into the corporate world. And so many educators since have reached out to me and said, how do you make that leap? How do you make that? How do you do that, right? And so go talk to my friend Nate.
Wow.
And then eventually we said, this is a
Let's
book.
write a book.
Yeah.
So that's the origin of the book.
Yeah.
So like how to support people who have left the profession. So my first question is, can you describe the current crisis facing the education as mentioned in the book?
Yeah, I'll try that and hand off to Nayeli when she talks about how she's coached educators and whatnot. But the current crisis is that it's been around for well over a century, right? Education in America is a business, is a sector that is often used as a scapegoat well documented in another book called Teacher Wars and many others. But it's the scapegoat of society, right? We expect teachers and schools to solve all of the issues and many other issues wrapped into that: sexism, racism, who can be a teacher, the pay and whatnot. So it's always been a profession that has not been. We say we respect teachers,
Not
but
in, not in practice.
yeah, you get Teacher Appreciation Week. But then it was really COVID that really just broke it, right? Everyone realized, like, okay, you don't really respect us. You want us to go back to, broken down schools with no ventilation, no supplies, no technology, and it just ripped the bandage off, and so many teachers and principals just got completely burned out and realized they wanted to leave. And you think that, like so many other sectors, that it's going to snap back to normal, and it's not, because I think people have realized that it's not for them. And that's the current crisis in education. I don't think it's going to change. In fact, all the numbers, all the statistics say it's going to continue for at least a generation, if not longer. But the other crisis, which is why we wrote this book, which is, educators, as qualified as they are, they train everybody to get jobs elsewhere. They don't know how to get jobs outside of education.
Right.
And it's unfortunate because they offer so much.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, when you think about the crisis in education and piggybacking off of the pandemic conversation, so many people found themselves going back and maybe uncomfortable. There were stories that we've heard of, like, teachers who went back who maybe had immunosuppression issues and didn't feel comfortable going back. And they were like, you've got to go back or you're going to lose your job. We also found that there was a lot of stress and maybe perhaps not the systems to help the teachers cope through stress or manage the anxiety they were feeling as they were coming back into the classroom. And so for all those reasons, we were like, we feel that this book needs to be written.
Wow, like the book is designed as first talking about the crisis in education and what is going on, and it continues with a series of vignettes with many individuals
Right.
who have left the profession. I'm wondering, how do you guys find the people? And was it easy to get them to open up? Because, like, when I was reading the book, I could feel the desperation that they are sharing with us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it saddens me as a current educator that people have to go through this when they all they wanted was to make a difference.
So the hard part was finding them. The easy part was getting them to open up. Because the hard part is, I have a big network of educators, right? Across Chicago region, some across the nation now. And you look on LinkedIn, you look on social media, and you say, okay, who was an educator but left successfully? And there's not many who left education and found a completely different career. Most land in what we call education adjacent careers, right?
Fintech or ed tech. I mean,
Yeah,
fintech,
yes. There's a lot of jobs in that. Very few went beyond education adjacent. So the hard part was finding them in different, to represent so many different sectors.
Right.
The easy part was when they opened up to us. I mean,
Yeah. No, I mean, when we were doing these interviews and, I mean, there were times when I was crying, when they were crying, and you just feel one, like a sense of relief. You also felt like with a lot of them, a sense of like sadness from having left. And, I don't think like, the educators that we spoke to when they started their careers, I don't think they imagined that they wouldn't end it there.
There was, in fact, I think it was our second interview with, I think it was Tanisha, that I reached out to her as a friend of a friend, so I didn't know her. And she emailed me and said, sure, you can interview me, but I need to talk to you first. And we talked on the phone. She said, I don't want to sound bitter, right? But at the same time, like, this is my journey.
Yeah.
Like, she was afraid of coming across as that bitter, educator. And so it was interesting. And I think that's our second one.
Right.
I thought, all right, there's something different here. We're going to write a manual, kind of very dry manual, like how to find a job kind of thing.
Yes.
And then
we
we're
realized,
like, no,
there's so
this is everyone's story.
much more.
This is very personal.
I mean, the book is truly a masterclass because it begins with the education series. It has all these interviews. It has for me, the most profound interview is the one, or the story is the one that you tell, Mike, and we'll go more into detail. But then you guys go into all these tips on how to make that leap, and
Yes.
you even use a framework. So it's truly a masterclass. So let's try to get into that. So
Yeah.
the book mentions many educators that felt stuck. Why do you think this is the case, and how this is affecting the education system as a whole?
So yeah, this is good. So I'll start with an educator. And
Yep.
you take.
Let's talk
So
about
my
stuff.
take on this is that because so why do they feel stuck? One, because there's a whole adage of if you can't do, teach, right? There's a whole belief that teachers have no capability. I mean, there's literally sayings that we say over and over again, which is quite the opposite. If you've been a
Right.
teacher, especially in a school that is struggling with finances, you're thrown into a classroom with nothing.
Right.
I mean, you have all the skills, but we have this belief in society like, oh, you're a teacher. And I share this in the book that when I left education and I tried to go into the commercial sector, and I'd say, well, I was a principal. I did HR, I did this, did this. But they still look at me like, well, you were a principal.
Yeah.
Right? We don't have any kids to take care of.
Correct.
And
We're
that's the
disciplined people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and that's the belief that, and so they feel stuck because, so that's one part, is this myth of what a teacher and a principal actually is. The second part, why they feel stuck, is that education is very separated. Almost every other business sector, they interact with other, you get to know people, right? But you're a teacher and you're in a classroom by yourself, interact with no other adults. The only time you interact with an adult is when it's a parent calling, right? So you never talk business. You barely interact with the teacher next door to you.
Right.
So they're literally isolated. But then as far as how to get out of that, I mean, what are some of the things you experienced?
Yeah, so it was, and I've worked with several educators throughout. One, if you think about like, we all know what a teacher does. And so we all have that teacher role model but like, could I picture, Miss Rosemary Maher being a salesperson? Well, no, because we all think of our teachers like as, to me, growing up like a mom or like, this person who educated me, who took care of me. Back in the day, Miss Maher even pulled my tooth out. But you think about a lot of times teachers see themselves and identify because everyone, when you have your career, that's how you identify yourself. That's how you kind of connect. And if you introduce yourself to other people, people say like, "Hi, I'm a teacher. Like, what do you do for a living?" And so we start with that and we lead with that. And so a lot of our identity is wrapped up in our profession. Because of that, sometimes we don't think about all the different things that you do and how to really promote that outside of the classroom. And so when you think about just feeling stuck, a lot of the educators felt a commitment to the kids, right? Like it's really hard to tell a teacher like your health is at stake. You need to consider something else. And the first thing we would hear back, or people that I've coached have said like, but I made a promise to stay there. I can't leave in the middle of the year. And, in one example, a teacher was taken out in a stretcher, and it's like, you can't get to that point. And so it's a really hard balance because you're balancing the emotional and the logical.
Amen. Amen. Very profound. So the book suggests that educators possess these transferable skills that you were mentioning about, but they're not fully recognized, like you were mentioning. People say, "Oh, so you're a principal, right?" Like, can you elaborate on some of the skills that the people that you interview mentioned that they were able to easily transfer from the teaching field or school field to the real world?
Yeah, one is flexibility, right? If you think about what an educator does or a teacher does in the classroom, you are not only running the curriculum, planning the curriculum, delivering it. Think about your audience, right? So you have children and they're all at disparate learning levels. So you have to get everybody to not only buy in, but accept and learn it. And so to yield consensus, that's boardroom material. So, you think about how an educator has to like show up and plan and then have these institute days where it's more planning or development. And so, when you put all those together on a resume, it's a very strong generalist person who can lead, create, deliver, and, bring others along.
Amen. There you go, educators. You're way more than a lesson plan. Okay, you're
Yes.
boardroom material like
Yes.
that. Amen. So, what lessons, Nishat, I believe, she shares an experience regarding the importance of having self worth and not being a martyr in the classroom.
We heard that a few times. In fact, one person just came out and said it and said, don't let yourself be a martyr. And it ties back into that, educators often guilted into, well, it's for the kids, right? You're spending your own money out of your pocket to buy some stuff for the kids. And we all believe it, right? We all buy into this myth. I mean, teachers are out there hustling, begging online through donors' shoes to get things that they should not have to even think about getting.
Right.
And it's about self-worth, because eventually you reach a point. Well, let me take it back a step too, because what we found, and I'm not too surprised by this based on my own experience, which is most educators get into it, their background, their childhood, lower class, lower middle class the best, rare to have upper middle class. So, when you go into teaching, sometimes you're the biggest success in your family, right? So, to fail from that or to leave that, you're gonna feel terrible. And so you don't have that self-worth going into it, because you have to have some gall to grow up poor and say, I'm going to be a CEO. Some people can do that. Most people can't.
Right.
Amen. I remember as a teacher going to these events where the book companies would go to a restaurant and give free resources. And I would literally go to the car and change my shirt and go back inside
And get more
to
stuff.
get more resources.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the struggle is definitely real. So, how can former educators leverage their people skills and client focused mindset, as you mentioned in the book, to excel in industries like, for example, real estate or customer success?
Let me put my twist on it too, because you're the expert at this point. But what stood out to me is one teacher, and I think Nishat was one of them, several interviews, they mentioned social and emotional skills, right? And those are things teachers have to learn to teach children, but at the same time, social emotional skills. And then another thing that stood out to me was people management. You're managing 30 human beings and their children, right? It goes to what Nallely was saying, which is if you can manage 30 children, you manage a lot of people, right?
Yes.
But there's so many skills that are transferable.
Yeah, and I think think about a teacher's day, right? It's very pragmatic. It's very organized. As adults, we still crave that structure, to know and imagine having someone who's going to hold your hand, talk about real estate, right? And one of the things that's going to be your biggest purchase, most people do not purchase real estate that often. So to have someone to teach you, to make you feel comfortable, to make you feel safe, to make you feel guided, but also that you trust this person because they know what they're doing, that's a teacher.
Wow. It's because as someone who is working in schools and don't know pretty much anything about outside of school, the book walks you through. One of the interviewees talks about when you are selling a house, it's not really one person who's making a decision, right? Like it's a couple, it's a family making a decision, and you have to work around it. And the way you phrase things is the way we differentiate in the classroom to engage the students.
Yes.
Quite fascinating. So the book discusses the impact of poor leadership, right? I could feel how awful some principles can be in determining people leaving the academic world. Can you share some thoughts on the role of leadership in retaining and improving the education system?
Let me first say that I went through, and personally, it was a pretty terrible experience of how I left the education field, right? I could easily be very bitter and angry and hold a grudge. And first of all, that's not the case at all. In fact, I joked that the CEO at the time, I should send her flowers, right? Like, she got me out of education. Thank you, right? But with all that said, and now I forgot the question after that. Leadership. So I don't blame anyone. So you think about, our district, there are just cycles and generations of, how it was treated by the wider society. And so we can blame, and you hear it all the time. You blame the board, you blame the superintendent, you blame the principal, you know, as a teacher, and I did it too, you blame whatever leader's near you, right? And it's a systemic problem. It's a structural issue, right? So, you know, principals, they're key, as are superintendents, but at the same time, you know, we can't go around. We're not going to solve anything by blaming anybody. I just want to say that first and foremost. But then, you know more about leadership or coaching
Well,
leadership.
I think it was La Doctora Alejandra who said she was there and they told her like, you're the principal now, like you're in charge right now, and with no training and no anything. And whether we talk about schools or corporate America or any other type of structure, if you're put in a position that you feel one was given to you just by default because you're there and now you have to figure it out and you don't have the proper training, you're gonna feel overwhelmed. You need that leadership. And I know another instance, we had someone who said that the principal was bullying her. And when, like, there's no difference between that and corporate America. We always say people don't leave jobs, they leave bosses.
Yes.
And this is also the case we saw throughout every interview where people were saying, I just lacked the leadership, or I needed someone to help me, or to be my voice, or to give me that structure, and they lacked it. And if you were at any other company, you wouldn't be criticized for leaving. They'd be like, oh yeah, your boss was a jerk.
Mhm.
But here we have the stigma of leaving the classroom.
Yeah, it's almost like leaving your children behind.
Right.
Um,
And that, man,
yeah, no,
a
please.
lot of them said
Please.
that. And actually, because I have Doctora Alejandra in my head, she actually said, I still see my kids because I live in the neighborhood. So she found a lot of joy that she was still able to see them progress and grow up. And so, she said, I didn't want to leave my kids.
Beautiful. And I personally know Dr. Alexandra. Hello.
No, she was
Such an
lovely.
awesome
Yeah.
educator.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, what commonalities exist between the lesson planning for students and designing training for adults, as highlighted by Ryan's story?
Yeah, you're going to be doing some training very soon, we heard. I would argue that the lesson plans that we require our teachers to do are much more rigorous and detailed than any training plan I've had to create outside, right? In many different other positions since teaching. I mean, the level of detail that we put them through is almost farcical, right? From standards they have to look up that they've never been taught how to teach, and now they're teaching them, and they have to find materials, and they have to create mini lessons, and they have to have objectives and themes and activities and tie all this stuff into it. Outside of education, when you teach someone, it tends to be much more incremental.
Yes.
I'm going to teach you how to do one thing, and that's it. This is how you do it. Done. Right? And then you move on to the next thing. In education, it's I'm going to teach you a million things while I'm juggling, spinning plates.
Right.
It's incredible.
So true.
Yeah.
Right.
So
And
true.
usually when you have, like, if you have a formal training in a corporate setting, you have the managers there, you have the people who are going to receive the training, you have the training laid out, you have the objective, you have all these ancillary teams of like HR making sure, yes, this is the objective we're trying to reach, this is what we're going to teach. You have legal who reviewed the training material to make sure. So it's a fully planned out, scoped out plan. I had shared that on the first day of CPS, someone reached out to me, and she was saying, like, I can't believe I came back. And one of the things she said, I'm teaching a brand new grade, different course. I don't have the curriculum. I feel so unprepared, and I feel like I'm doing a disservice to the kids.
Wow. It shouldn't be this difficult.
No.
What strategies can individuals use to avoid overcommitting and feeling guilty for not working constantly, as mentioned by you, Mike?
So this is interesting, and I know Nallely has a really good take on the quiet quitting part that was a trend outside of education. But I would argue that quiet quitting, it wasn't called that, but started happening even before the pandemic was a principle. And Chicago is very union militant. If you can work with them, you can work with anyone.
Amen.
And I've got good friends, right? Don't get me wrong. Great friends.
We love you, CTU. Okay.
And he's out of it. But I remember very distinctly that they said, we're not going to answer emails after, 4 p.m., 5 p.m., right? And they said, we want a balance, right? And it's very difficult to do in education because parents come to you panicking, often about trivial things, but they're still panicking.
Right.
From their perspective,
It's valid.
it's valid.
Yeah.
And you have literally emergencies. You have sometimes life-threatening issues of children, of teachers. It's hard to just turn off because you're working 24/7. But that's the first thing is you need to know when to close and walk away and set firm boundaries, and then don't feel bad doing it. It's hard to do, but you see it in corporate all the time that they respect people's time.
Right. And I would add therapy, because a lot of that guilt we carry, it's because you're a good person, right? You feel bad because you wish you could do more. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with feeling bad, but it shouldn't overwhelm you. It shouldn't overtake you. And so I always recommend therapy to work on guilt issues. But also, you know, I one of the things I do a lot in my coaching is I tell the person I'm coaching, like, talk to yourself like a friend, right? If your friend was feeling guilt, you would say, no, you're not getting paid for this. It's past 5 o'clock, or it's Saturday morning. Like, go to the farmer's market or go do this. We would never challenge our friends. We would tell our friends, like, let it go. And a lot of times we hold ourselves to a standard that's so unreasonable because that's just what we feel.
So true. Peter Attia, in his book on longevity, he says that one of the best advice he was given is that whenever you feel like that, to send yourself a text as if you were sending it to your best friend.
Yeah, that's great advice.
We will never tell our best friend,
like, you're so dumb.
Exactly.
What are you doing? Yeah.
Amen. Good. Here, a lot of strategies. How can teachers and former educators learn to set healthy boundaries and not allow their identity to be solely defined by their job?
I would say, when we are defined by our jobs, it's not necessarily a bad thing, right? It means you're proud of what you're doing. It means that you enjoy what you're doing, or that you did this and you did great. Before you think about, we would all be like, oh, we know who the doctors and lawyers are in the room. But to know, like, the teachers, and to know the nurses, and to know, like, who the policemen are in the area. We do that because it's what we identify as. And I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing, to identify with your job, because to me it shows a lot of passion.
For sure.
But I
Do
will
you
say
have a
though,
take on that?
yeah, I completely agree with what she said. But if your self worth is wrapped up in that, and you think that leaving and doing something else
Yeah.
is going to make you less than who you are as a person, as a human, then that's an issue, right?
Right.
So true.
Because there are so many opportunities, and even if you go to something that we call lesser in society, a stay-at-home parent, or you go and become a barista at Starbucks. If that's what you need at that time in your life, there's nothing wrong with it. You have to think of your life as a series of chapters.
Exactly.
Right? And we know someone right now who's taking a step back, shifting gears, doing something that, they can do much bigger and better, but at the same time, this is what they need right now. There's nothing wrong with that. You shouldn't criticize yourself for just taking care of yourself and your family and doing what you need to do before you find the next journey or experience or whatnot.
Beautiful. I love that. No,
Yeah,
please.
and if you find yourself in that position, get a pen and paper and write down everything you are. So, I start by saying, like, I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a daughter, I'm Mexican, I'm a prima, I'm all these things, because it sometimes is a good reminder to show you that you are a lot of things besides just your career.
And one more thing too, give yourself credit for your accomplishments. Right,
Yeah.
that's one thing that helped me is when I left education. I said, you know what, I accomplished all these things. I could die tomorrow and be proud of my life. Right, and if you're a teacher, most likely you've had at least a handful, probably dozens of students who will always remember you and be thankful for what you did.
Yes.
You've changed lives, right? Be proud of that.
Sure.
Now go do nothing and say, I've accomplished a lot.
Yeah. Masterclass. How can educators apply their skills and knowledge to careers in the fields like corporate training, DEI consulting, or product training as exemplified by several individuals.
This is all my class.
One, it's by understanding first, it's hard to find what job to look for. One of the things I like to do is search job boards based on your strongest skills, and you'll know your strongest skill. A lot of people will tell you like, "Oh, you're so good at presenting, or you're so good at doing this." Just put that skill set in there and be like, detail oriented. It's going to give you all these job descriptions that list that as a desired skill set. And then I always say, take that job description and circle all the other things you can do, so that you could start identifying like, this is what I can do well.
Yes.
And then take that to the corporate world, right? So you think about DEI consulting, and especially in neighborhoods that are, very foreign rich and just have like all this diversity, like you've done that. You've adapted to language barriers. You've adapted to making sure everybody feels included, that there's harmony, and so all those things are very hard to do when you are, like, I think teachers are just on autopilot to do it.
For sure.
But they don't take a step back to say, like, I can do this. This is what I've done. And I've brought in, everybody to feel well. If you think about training, we want people to learn, and teachers can take people who are at different learning levels and make them all feel good about themselves and feel accomplished. So bringing that to the boardroom or to the corporate trainings is really fun. And I think that if we think about the people who shaped us and taught us the most, it's teachers. So if I was in corporate and I wanted someone to come and teach my team, I would pick a teacher.
Wow.
But I do want to add that those 18 educators, at least 12 to 15 different careers or jobs.
Yeah.
And one person opened a franchise, right?
Yeah.
Restaurant, food business.
Correct.
Yeah,
So many things that just apply one for one. All of your skills that just transfer over.
And there were jobs that, for example, I never heard of, like, for example, product training or customer experience,
Yeah.
right? Like, there are things that for me are foreign, and I felt so informed reading this book to learn about those things. Now we're talking about that. What are some strategies for someone who is venturing out of education on LinkedIn to find gigs?
All right. One, reach out to people that you know. A lot of times, it's very daunting of a task. You don't want to bother someone because they're doing their own thing. But like, no, everybody. We love to help people, and then when we need help, we're scared to ask because we don't want to bother other people. But I'm like, you need to give that other person the joy of being able to help you and bring you along.
Now, I just flashed back to one of our first coaching sessions that we met at Panera over in Elmhurst or Elmwood Park.
Yeah.
And you said, look at your network, right? Reach out to people. And I said,
they're
I
your
don't want to bother them.
Yeah.
And she goes, no, this is what you do in the business world. In the business world, you're always trying to make connections because that's where the business happens, right? People don't like to just sit in an office. You have to do that, but it's where you make the connections and you relate to people and you say, and it can be transactional, but it can also be transformational for both people because people want to feel good about helping other people, right? And that's what happens outside of classrooms, right? And it took me a while for me to realize that. It took her to tell me, just reach out. And so I had a series of coffees with people. And after that, I had like 2 or 3 job offers, right? Wow. Interviews just lined up just from friends that I never talked to them about stuff outside of school. But when I sat there and said, here's my resume, what do you think I could do? They said, you can do this. Call me.
Yeah.
Wow. It seems so daunting for me to even think about it. If I ever step out of the classroom, like, I will see like a brand new mountain. And again, I want to give kudos because the book walks you through the possible things that you can do in your life. So one of my favorite topics about self-awareness and emotional intelligence. How can we develop this to prevent burnout among educators?
Well, burnout is hard, and burnout happens everywhere. And we've never seen it as badly as when we saw the pandemic, right? Which forced us to reimagine how we worked, how we interacted with people, a disconnect from the workplace. And so I don't even remember what the question was. And I was just like,
No,
I
that's
think I
okay.
got some PTSD.
Another question here: emotional intelligence and self-awareness, and how that can help educators that are on the trenches thinking about changing to use those skills to help prevent burnout.
Well, it's listening to your body,
Mm.
right? Your body's going to tell you. And a lot of times we may not see the signs right away, right? It may start by maybe gaining weight or disengaging with activities on the weekends because you're so tired. We've had educators that I've coached tell me, like, I just go home and I go to sleep and I'm not giving my kids the right quality of life. And then they feel bad because they're doing that. And so, I think the first step is physically, your body's going to tell you it needs help. Secondly, it's maybe your friends and family are going to tell you, right? And there were times when my dad would be like, "Oh, you just seem so angry all the time," and I'm like, "I'm not angry. I'm just so tired and I'm so stressed." And so listen to others that are also telling you that you're being different or something's happening. And I would say, just you could read the steps of burnout, but it's like disengagement. It's, reclusing yourself to your couch or maybe watching too much TV. And so if you lived a different life from 6 months ago to right now, like try seeing what those changes were, what caused them and what you're feeling. Maybe it's for the positive. Maybe you're able to sit on the couch and watch TV because you have made yourself less stressful or you've put the boundaries up. But if you're finding that it's just like a disengagement, like listen to your body and listen to those signs.
I'll put that I think it's more difficult for educators, and there's similar professions to, because I completely agree, and I didn't listen to my body when I was a principal. I was born out, whatnot.
19 hours a day, you mentioned.
Yeah, easily. Multiple days for months, years. That you're on the stage, right? And I'll never forget this when I was a new teacher, and it wasn't just teaching kids. When I realized that you're a performer, you're performing in front of kids, and then as a principal, you're performing in front of everybody, nonstop, so everyone's watching you,
and
you
nobody likes you,
and no one likes you, right? They'll smile to you, like, you're like, oh, okay. And you're on the stage, and your body is tense nonstop. It's not just you're in a play where you're on the stage for an hour or 2 hours all the time with your work. So when you go home, you just collapse.
Mhm.
You're exhausted. And so you almost forget how to listen to your body. And that's part of the problem. And that's when you really have to disengage and cut the cord on the weekends and not do a single thing. And just, as my therapist said, because I went to therapy after I left, still in touch with her. We interviewed her. And she said, go walk in the forest. Just go walk in the woods. And she said, go walk in the woods and cry. And I was like, okay, and I might have, but that's what you need to do. Yeah. You need to get back in touch with your body and just say, you shouldn't feel stressed all the time.
It's like we are educated to be always run, 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 run,
right?
Never rest.
Yes.
And talking about rest, another thing that we don't get often in schools of education is that they are teaching us in a way to coach others, coach students, coach teachers if you're becoming administrators. Mm-hmm. But often we don't talk about the art of being coach.
Yes.
So how can the role of coaching play in helping school administrators improve their mental health and create a safe and supportive school culture?
So coaching is meant to help bridge that like professional development. It's supposed to give you like a cheerleader and a mentor and someone that could tell you like, hey, I see your blind spots, let's work on them. A lot of times you're right, teachers are the coaches, right? They're the ones telling the student like, hey, you're behind here, like practice your J's. That's what they would tell my son because he had a J in his name. So they do that because they want to see marked improvement. They want you to do better. I think about the teachers who I'm going to use a lot of my son's experiences, but like our teacher was like, hey, he needs speech therapy. And I'm like, oh, he already had speech therapy. And she's like, he needs more. And it's like, she was making sure he got the coaching he needed to be successful. When we think about teachers and we know that they're even close to burnout, or we're not planting those trees early to make sure that they have shade throughout their career, like it hurts the whole foundation. We need to make sure that teachers feel supported, that we give them the tools, that we say, this is how you face challenges, or this is how, some of these conversations should be structured. And we don't do that. And then sometimes people get promoted into a leadership position and they haven't been told how to be a leader. And so you've gone from like peer to leader, and now there's resentment and no one's been trained and no communication has been sent. And so it just creates more tension. And so coaching and workshops to build like that cohesion within the teams is super important to make sure you have a good functioning school.
So can I add to that? I think it's also related to self-worth, and that if you think of, I was taught this in my doctoral program, how to improve a school, which is you think of principal, draw an arrow to teachers, draw an arrow to the students. The principal is there, and you can go outward as the superintendent, board. The principal can only affect the teachers, right? And the teachers can only affect the students. And we're so focused on that chain, but around academics and things like that, and we're not focused on ourselves. That, what we talk about in the book is that well-being is a huge focus right now, social emotional learning and well-being of students, but we don't even focus on the teachers, the principals. And how do we expect them to teach children how to find balance and well-being when they're burned out? But we don't invest in them at all. I contacted so many principals, superintendents across the country saying, what do you do for well-being? And they give me a long list. We do this, this, this. And I say, oh, that's for the students. That's great. What do you do for the teachers? You Teacher Appreciation Week.
The diploma we are posting on the wall.
And we had, I was working with the principal and I said, what is the hardest part of your job? And he said, managing the construction projects. And I was like, oh no. So you think about that arrow. So now that kind of first arrow is gone from the teachers. The person who's supposed to be coaching and mentoring the teachers is busy running a capital expense project.
Wow. Towards the end of the book, you quote Fulham that one of his most important lessons was that in order to truly bring change in the school, you truly have to love your teachers.
First secret, yeah.
That was so empowering. So, follow-up question about the coaching. What professional development the coach needs to have in order to learn how to coach?
Oh, that's a great question. One, I'll tell you my personal one. So I've done extensive leadership and management training. My undergrad is in economics and management. Believe it or not, my master's is in information technology operations management, so nothing to do with coaching. But I have always had a continuous, certification and education for leadership and management and training. I've led teams as big as like 100-person team. And it was working with like HR or trainers to understand like, this is what my team needs. As a leader, it's your responsibility to know like who's where and what their goals are. And sometimes it's not about coaching. In some companies, it was about like creating a good maternity leave because we had women who, like I was having children and I'm like, our policy is not very good. And so coaching is that social like awareness of saying like, this is what my team needs and I need to get it for them. And, I'll be honest, like, I know when I'm good at coaching and I also know when I'm not, I know who to send them to because you can't be an expert at everything.
Amen. Yeah. Amen. And principals are de facto coaches, even though there's not a lot of training, right? There's a lot of data. Right? So, how can educators navigate feelings of guilt and self-doubt after making this career change or leaving the school environment?
Self-doubt and guilt?
Yes.
I would say that's two different things. Self-doubt, for real, and that's valid, right? I'm in my 40s. I won't tell you which end of the 40s, but I'm in my 40s. And I changed careers, right? Mm-hmm. That's daunting. And when I started out, in one job, I was, I was working with the kids, right? I was managed by someone who had just moved out of the parents' house, right? I was like laughing, don't ever say that again. That's so cute. It's adorable. So there's going to be that self-doubt. But again, it goes back to recognizing that there's nothing wrong. There's something admirable that you have many journeys in your life. You'll have more. If you're fortunate to have one job all the way until retirement, good for you. Most people don't, especially these days. And starting over again, it's a challenge. It's excitement. Just take that on. But self-doubt's going to be there and just own it and just say this is part of the process. The guilt is a different thing.
Yeah. Did you feel guilt changing professions?
Yeah, I felt guilt like getting fired. Like, I'm sorry, like, and even though I sued and won and disproved it all, but in the end, like, yeah, you feel guilty, like you're walking away, you're leaving, and some more former colleague would say, oh, you should come back, and parents and even former students, they'd say, oh, you should, and you feel guilty. But I reached a point. It didn't take that long for me because in retrospect, I was burned out, right? I was burning the candle on five ends. And I thought, you know what? I've given so much, 15 years, right? And always given over 100%. And then you look around, you say, so many people have a comfortable life. Why don't I do that for me, my family, my children? I deserve it.
Makes sense.
And first of all, I love self-doubt. So I think that doubt is a really good, like, guiding light. Like, if you start doubting yourself, you're going to be like, okay, well, oh, I don't think I could do it. And I always say, like, okay, follow that path. Why can't you do it? What's stopping you from doing it? Is it an awareness or is it fear? Is it a skill or is it that you've never done it before? So walk through that, and then you just start going through, like, oh, okay, actually, I don't know why I was doubting it, and so doubt is going to tell you all the insecurities you're feeling. It's going to tell you, like, this is where my brain thinks I'm going to fail, this is where I think I'm going to fall. Catch those, write them out, and say, like, okay, I doubt myself because of this. Doubt, especially self-doubt, and it's a popular term is imposter syndrome, that you don't feel you belong, but like NBA stars have it, actors and actresses have it, like everybody has it. It's just how you manage through it. And I just say, like, follow that rabbit hole until you feel like, oh no, you're right, I can do this.
I love that, self-doubt as a teacher.
Yeah.
And I would argue, just listening to you, I realized, like, that's where that is the learning, that's the edge of learning, right? If you ever reach a point where you're just like, oh, I got this, you're probably not pushing yourself, right? So self-doubt is when you're learning, no matter what you're doing.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, guys. So there's Jeremy, who mentioned tearing down the mythology of teachers not having a network. How can educators build and leverage their networks to enhance their career opportunities?
I mean, he did a lesson. In fact, he posted
on
LinkedIn.
Posted it,
I was like, oh, you record us while we're recording you. It's brilliant, right?
Like
he's
Inception.
a LinkedIn master, right? And he went on LinkedIn and saw that, but it goes back to networking, right? Be shameless, right? Don't be embarrassed that you're reaching out, asking for help or asking for connections or just asking for advice. That's a first step.
Yeah. And I love Jeremy's, because he was like, and look up people that you may know, whether it's like a same interest or they went to your college or, like, just go and like send them an invite. And it's funny because I've sent out several LinkedIn invites to be like, I would love to have a coffee or a virtual coffee with you. And people reply.
Yes.
So I think Jeremy brings up a good point, that we associate our network with the people who are around us. And our network is the people we've touched or been touched by at some point in our careers, that will, or even our family members, because they're the people who will advocate for you, or they're the people who believe in you and will cheerlead you.
And sometimes you don't even realize how quickly that network branches out, because you'll go to someone and they'll say, I don't know anybody, I can't help you, but I know someone who does. And everyone has their own tendrils that will branch out, and it quickly grows.
Talking about teachers and educators that transition, we talked this before we started recording. How can educators successfully rewrite their resumes and use the appropriate jargon to match the job they're applying for in order to obtain those opportunities?
So
that's where I get my glasses.
Yeah. Okay. So first,
this is important. Listen.
First, look up. I'm a big believer in looking up companies that you want to work for, right? And when we were all in our 20s, we always, and Google started, we were all like, yeah, we want to work for Google. The line starts right here. But what did we like about that company, or what are you looking for in a company? And then, I always say, like, search everything, talk to people. There were so many jobs that I had in my career that I would have never knew even existed. If I hadn't talked to someone to tell me, like, go here or do this. Learn the jargon by like searching things. I always say the TLAs, the 3-letter acronyms. Learn those because what CRM means here is not what it's going to mean over here, or CPR, that we think is just medical, that has another meaning over here. Learn them and ask people who are in that field, or ask people who work for that company, what does this mean to you? So that when you go into an interview, as you're putting your resume together, you have those listed. I'm also a big believer in having like skill set and experiences, or beliefs and values on your resume, because those are what's going to ping, right?
Yes.
So, and spell it out instead of putting the acronym. Don't put, CRM, put, customer relationship management, so that it pings that way. Also, in your resume, and actually on LinkedIn, put as many buzzwords as you can put, like, because that's going to be the recruiter scan first. So put all the words you can think of in there. They don't even have to make a sentence, because that's what's going to ping the computer.
Yeah. It's those screeners that
Yeah.
people don't even read it the first time, and outside of education, you get pinged, it gets screened. But a couple other things though and you taught me this, which is you got to change the jargon. So from education to outside.
Yes.
So we don't have students, we have clients, or we have customers, however, whatever fits the jargon. So you do have to change that.
Yeah. Key stakeholders.
Yeah.
It's things that you don't think, right? Because you might put, an educator might put taught 5th grade, right? But you guys talk about taught 30 students and accomplished such and such percentage, because that's what companies may be looking for.
Right.
What kind of growth were you able to produce in your industry?
And let's go through that example. So, if you're a teacher and you're just like, well, I teach 5th grade. Think about the impact of 5th grade, right? You have 10 and 11-year-olds, which are difficult because they're leaving like the child and going into almost like a preteen. Think about what comes with that, right? It's being able to manage emotions. It's being able to, direct and guide people to learn different topics. This is the one before they go to middle school. So you're also managing the emotions of leaving maybe a familiar school, and you're also maybe managing people who feel like they're at the top of the food pyramid in the school, because they're the seniors of the school. So how do you phrase those things so you could say, like, it's not just I taught fifth grade, like I prepared this group to move on and transition to an entire different level, and I was the last person who had them.
Wow. Well, to add to that too, though, that don't be embarrassed to not only Google the acronyms, all the rest, but you'll find, like, within a business, you'll have two people working side by side. They don't even understand each other's jobs. They don't understand each other's acronyms. But that's the easiest part, is learning the acronyms, learning the language. Educators have the skills, which is what you're getting paid for. You're not getting paid because you know some vocabulary. That's easy to learn. And most times in a business, not everyone in the business even understands the acronyms. So don't be embarrassed to ask or Google and say, so that's like the surface level.
Yes.
And be confident, because a lot of times, and I'll give you an example. I was working at PepsiCo, and my manager said like 4 sentences, and I looked at him and he's like, what? And I was like, I have no idea what you said. and so he explained it to me. And I think, like, if I wasn't confident enough, and, I for sure felt dumb, but I was just like, I need to tell him, like, I'm not keeping up with this conversation.
What's your phrase? It's okay to feel dumb.
You can feel stupid, but don't stay stupid.
Yeah.
So how can the experiences of educators, such as Mike, your success in leading change within the teachers union, how did you apply that to make significant changes in the corporate world? And what challenges do educator turn corporate professionals face in this transition?
First, I'm going to say I didn't make any change in the teachers union. I don't want them calling me tonight. But how do you take your experiences as an educator into the corporate sector? I think it comes down to just identifying your skill set, right? Which, again, Nallely explained that it's sometimes hard to transfer. It's hard to identify, to take a step back and say, well, what do I really do? I teach 5th graders. No, you don't. You do so many other things. So the first thing is identifying your skill set, and those broader kind of holistic skills, which can transfer to so many. We talk about people skills, right? We manage people all day. That's a highly sought after skill right there,
Very much.
and we forget it. We don't appreciate that. That I've met people, very well paid people outside of education who don't know how to work with other people, right? And we do that every single day. If you have a people skills, you're golden.
You're
That's it.
golden.
Yes.
And teachers have people skills. Like they have some of them are saying that they have to manage. I think I cannot remember which one, but she mentions that she has so much experience. She opened something with another teacher when they left the profession, the accountants,
Oh
right?
yeah, the
The
accountants.
taxes.
Yeah, the taxes.
So they
Yeah.
tell this story about that every time they communicate with parents, they notice that they have to sweeten that coffee in a way to satisfy the needs of the parents who were in distress and how they took that to the professional world.
Yeah.
There's so many things that are transferred and we don't even realize.
So many.
Beautiful. So Albert emphasizes the importance of setting a vision for oneself. Can you guys share an example of your own life where having a clear vision helped you achieve your goals?
I have one too.
You
Okay.
go
All right.
first.
I had the goal of by 30, I wanted to have my master's. And I was like, I want to have my master's. I want to have a house. And, I always hustled. I always had, my dad had a bar, so I would bartend there on the weekends, or I would waitress, and I would do anything. Like if someone's like, hey, for $200, dress as a chicken in this corner, I'd be like, for how long? So, I was always like, yeah, like let's do it because I knew I had that goal. And it was a very clear vision, and I told everyone I was going to do it. So I got my master's after I turned 30, but I was still 30. So maybe didn't hit the mark, but I knew what direction I was headed. I also knew in my professional career that I wanted to lead a team. Like it was really important for me to people manage because to me that was a strength I felt I've had early on, and I knew data analytics. Whenever I took a new job, I wanted to make sure I understood it, which was sometimes very complex. So I took SQL training classes because I wanted to know how to communicate with that group. So to me, the vision was always like wherever I went, I wanted to make sure I knew everyone around me and that I could communicate to them in a language that was what they understood and that I didn't sound stupid.
Yeah. I know Albert's vision was to go to Harvard, right? That was one of his visions, and he made it, right?
Yeah.
When you asked that question, I was thinking, gosh, I feel like I've never had a clear vision. I feel like I've been bumbling along for many years, right? But I'm sure I had some kind of vision.
Sure, Mike.
Yeah, I think you did okay.
Right? You don't need to complete. But the most recent one was that I was at a nonprofit, and their board was stacked, amazing people, very successful. I mean, name drop some of them, and that's when I realized I was like, I've been in the education and nonprofit for so long, and I never felt good enough to go into the commercial, the corporate sector, right? For whatever reason, right? I don't know why. I mean, that's when I realized, I can make that jump. It's not that hard. It reminds me of Obama's quote where he said, like, I've been at the tables with some of the most powerful, successful people, and they're not that smart, right? I'm paraphrasing, and it struck me. I said, I want to try something else. No more education or nonprofit. I want to try something else. And I went for the corporate commercial sector, and I did it. I had a clear vision. I said, I can do it. I got the help. You can't always do it alone. In fact, most of the time you can't do it alone. But you reach out, you network, you set your goals, and you go for it.
So, Mike, let's talk about your story, okay? Like, as a school principal, right? Like, reading your testament about what occurred to you, it was very impactful, okay? I always tell you that when you were succeeding in school X and changed to school Y, we were all like saying, wow, there's one guy who can do it. That's Mike Beyer. So in one of the schools, you handle an ethical dilemma. involving a teacher who used, believe it or not, a tarantula to frighten a student on the autism spectrum.
Mm.
Tell us about how this incident impacted your career.
Yeah, that was really interesting. That was I wasn't even I was a principal intern, right? Um, so and as a teacher and again, I always give everyone the benefit of the doubt. She did that because she felt threatened by this autistic child who was older and or not older but bigger than her, and she did it to keep him away while the aide was out. And the social worker alerted to me, and I went down to the classroom. I said, "No, remove the." I sat with her until the aide came back, and she started. I didn't mean to. So I kind of lectured her a little bit. I didn't raise my voice. She was married to someone powerful. I got an earful, and it just goes to show how politics, unfortunately, negatively affects the school system. Right?
Yes.
Shouldn't be the case. There's a clear violation of so many issues, and I was the one who was pulled in to my supervisors, and it taught me right then and there. In fact, I remember distinctly a professor said, you know, all right, we get it, right? We know what happened. You didn't do anything wrong, but the analogy is that, and I remember this to this day, you were at a stop sign or you're at a stoplight. It was a red light. The light turned green and you drove forward, but you didn't look left and right, and someone boom, and it's your fault for not looking. And that taught me very early on that that's a job. It's true in life. It's a good analogy to keep in mind.
It's a good analogy, yeah.
But when you're a principal, and especially in districts with fewer resources, you're responsible for so much, and you can't do it all. In fact, you wake up each day and say, what am I going to try to enforce or support today? I can't do it all.
Yes.
And any moment someone could walk in and find something wrong because you can't monitor everything. And you're responsible for every single human in that building. And in my case, I have 3 campuses, right? Responsible for all 3 at once because I'm magic. But that taught me early on that it's just a
not magic Mike.
Yeah,
I'm not that guy. But it's just a silly job. It's unfortunate that we expect so much beyond anything.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Mike, how did your mentor principal's response to shape your understanding of these dynamics? And you mentioned right now about this analogy of the traffic light. How similar is the mentor to the coach?
How similar is the mentor to the coach?
Yes.
How so?
To the coach,
Oh,
the mentor.
The mentor at that time had some personal involvement. She had skin in the game, right? And what I should have learned from that is that she was protecting herself and her family, and rightfully so, right? She was the breadwinner. They depended on her. And I look back now. In fact, there were so many principals I ran into, and I thought, man, you're not really trying. But then I would look back and like, well, you're still there, and you're gonna retire with a nice pension because they balance themselves and they built boundaries, and I just went full force. And so to go back to your question, the mentor at that time had skin in the game, so they could not be purely objective.
Yes.
Right? They're going to protect themselves. A coach that you pay, they're going to. I mean, there's some subjectivity right there, but a coach that you pay, they're there to help you succeed, and that's it.
Right.
Wow.
And
wow.
if I may just as the coach, the coach is also going to tell you things that maybe are uncomfortable. And, like there have been several times I'm coaching someone and they're like, well, I just did this. And I'm like, stop doing that. But it's someone who is like your supporter, and we don't know where you're in. We don't know your environment. We know your story. And so, we're going to be on your side, but also recognizing that there's external factors or things that are happening. And, we're going to be the ones that help you find your skill sets, help you say like, okay, so, was this your fault or was this the fault of them? And let's go through everything so that we can have this like unbiased perspective, because I don't know everyone else who was at the school.
So let me ask you a follow-up question. Yeah. What makes a good candidate to be coached? Like someone comes to you, what they need to be for you to get the best out of them?
Trust and a willingness to be coached. So I had someone I was coaching, and we were 3 weeks in, and I said, I can't coach you. You don't trust me and you don't open up. And so you have to have a genuine want to like grow and to do better or to find something else or, recover your confidence. And if you can't go in, and it's like, and I've had other people walk into my house and like, you're the coach, tell me. And I'm just like, that's not how coaching works. That's not how coaching works. I don't come to me because you're in trouble. Come to me because you want help, because you understand that, you know what, like you have this career and at this point in your career you've realized you could use some outside opinion and even I equate it to like legal stuff, like even chief legal officers have outside counsel because they want to make sure that you're checking in and making sure everything's like done the right way. And so if you need a coach, if you're like, hey, I'm kind of stuck, or I don't feel like I'm doing this, or I feel like I could get better at that, or some people call me and say, I had a presentation and I feel like I fell flat on my face and I need help with that. Like, then we can work together.
Would you say it's the willingness to be vulnerable? Because if you're not willing to be vulnerable and put yourself out there, then you're not willing to change and learn and listen.
Yes. And, there have been times, I canceled the contract twice where I said, you're not growing and you don't want to grow and you're not doing the homework or the assignments. And so if I can't, it's got to be a willingness from both.
So we're gonna go. I am so interested in that relationship between when he got to you, but you one of the most touching moments in the book after you go to all this thing and they remove you, even though, like you said, you took them to court. A parent, supported parent, supported you pro bono. You won your case. You demonstrated, you know what, they're full of it. At some point, you went home and you are hugged by your wife.
Yeah. That was actually when I was removed, like the day.
Can you share that story? Because people have not read the book yet. You need to read this.
Put a couple teardrops. So I was removed. I got called downtown and I said, oh, something's wrong, right? I had no idea. And I got called in an office with the head of HR and, someone from the C-suite. I'm like, okay, I got chills. And they started reading a paper very dryly. I was like, oh, geez, I've done this to other people, right? They take my keys and they walk me out because now you're a security threat, right? It's protocol, right? And they walk you out of the building and they just send you on your way. So I'm walking home because I was walking distance from my school. And I call my wife, first thing, and they sent out an email blast, probably like within seconds. And she said, did you get fired? I was like, how did you know? She goes, I got the email. So then when I went home that night, I was bawling, I was tearing up, and I hugged my wife. She was crying, and I was thinking the worst, which is I'm the breadwinner. Everyone depends on my insurance, all the rest. But she said, it's over, finally over. I said, what? It's one of those like records screeching off. Like, what are you talking about? She goes, finally, you're done with that job. And I realized how much impact the stress that I was bringing home was having on her and our kids.
It's really.
Yeah. And that's why I could never go back. Maybe one day when I'm, 60 and my kids are out of the house and I just want to do it for fun. But I thought, I can't do that to my family. I can't do that.
Yeah.
That's you mentioned that one of the reasons why you moved from one school to the other was to be closer to home.
Yeah.
But then you ended up being more time because of the demanding, because you ended up going through a process of merging two schools, and you didn't go to the easy way where you were merging two affluent schools.
Yeah.
You really practice the equitable thing that we are all preaching, but many of us are not doing. Can you walk us through that journey and what that meant through you?
Quickly walk us through that journey.
Yeah. I mean, we try to do what's right. And I say in the book that if I had listened to the podcast, Nice White Parents, I probably would have not done it, right? Because you listen to that podcast, you're like, oof. But we try to do what's right and merge Ogden and Jenner. It was difficult, and my partner Rob, we lost in the process. It was very tragic, but yeah, that's another book, another day. I don't know.
For sure, there's a new chapter. So one of the most innovative things in the book is that you guys are proposing the creation of the chief well-being officer position in school districts. Can you tell us about this innovative idea?
So it's not innovative because it's in, and we learned about it, and she knows more.
Yeah.
It's in the corporate world. It's been around forever. And what's interesting is that DEI, even though we've been trying in schools for decades and decades, in CPS, they didn't have a chief diversity officer until relatively recent.
Yeah.
They were doing corporate world long ago. They've been doing wellness for long. I mean,
Yes.
if you want to speak to the corporate side of it.
Yeah, no, you think about the well-being, right? And so if you think about even like, I want to say like 15, maybe, 15 years ago, when did Fitbit trackers come out?
Yeah.
And we got a discount to move. We got like reimbursements, like you get free lunch if you go on a walk. We had all these programs in corporate to say like, hey, work out, eat better. We're going to have, free snacks, but the snacks are going to be healthy and they're going to be available to everybody. Or, there was this thing about who you could go to, and like even, I think about just like there's so many perks, just the insurance, what is it, the EAP, the Employee Assistance Program, to get you a therapist right away, and it covered your family. All these things that were meant for you to be better, be happier, be more engaged. If you go back to like late 80s when SAS opened up and their big campus, and they had like dry cleaning and childcare, like it's to make sure they can take away some of those stressors from your work life, that you could come to work and just work. There's some companies that offer like ready to go meals for dinner so that you can leave and just take those meals, and you're done. You go home and you enjoy the time with your family. There's the 9-100s where you work 9 days and have 100% of your hours. So you could have a 2-day weekend and a 3-day weekend.
All these things.
Yeah.
Yes. When I realized it's like this actually exists, and they do it for a good reason, right? Because you can't have a successful business when your people are burned out, right? So it's a bit of a transaction. It's not just like being warm and fuzzy. They're doing it for good reason. It attracts people. It retains the best talent. It makes people want to work a bit harder, or just when they're working, they're more effective because they're better balanced. And in education, we just do not think about it at all. In fact, again, I have yet to find a program nearly as comprehensive as what you'll find outside of education, the commercial and corporate sector, of how we even measure the well-being of adults. It's just not done.
Right.
And it's not that we don't care. It's just that I think it's a combination of lack of finances. There's no funding for it. I think it's also a combination of that, school boards are afraid that they're going to be accused of taking it easy on teachers because, those are our scapegoats right there. They don't deserve that. They get the summers off. Isn't that enough? Is that? Yeah.
Well, you mentioned that you start realizing or appreciating having lunch without having to rush.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, the one we heard all the time was, "Oh, I love using the bathroom whenever I want."
I actually had to delete, like, we had, I have like 3 examples.
Yeah,
I remember as a teacher, like, you would have to be in your classroom for 3 hours. You couldn't use the bathroom no matter what. You have to buzz the office. Can you send someone to watch the kids while I use it? And then that was one of the privileges of being a principal. I was like, oh, I can go to the bathroom?
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah. Wow. Everyone said that.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So you talk quite a lot towards the end of the book about the concept of work-life integration.
Yes.
Can you discuss what does this entail?
She's a model for it.
I love work-life integration.
I mean, we're in your office.
Yeah, we're in my office. And so I'll give you an example of a company. I used to work for Miller Coors. And one of the things I really valued, I was a new mom. So this was 11 years ago. And at every facility, they had breast pumps. And they also sent one to your house. And they sent you car seats. And so to me, that was like, oh, my work is looking after my family. And it just was very nice to know that this was available to me everywhere I went. I also think that there were the boundaries of after 5 p.m. no calls or no meetings. Friday afternoons no meetings. Like use that time to wind down your week. Um, I love the idea, and I don't think there's like the work life balance, right? Like you work from 9 to 5 and then you come home and then you have dinner with your kids and then you like to me work life integration meant I'm going to go to work. I'm going to go to my doctor's appointment. I'm going to come back. I'm going to work some more. I'm going to have lunch. I'm going to leave at 4 because, I have to go get my kids from daycare. And then I'm going to make dinner. And then at 8 or 9 p.m., once the boys are in bed, I'll go back to working. So it's just part of my life, but it's not within these hours and these guardrails. Like it lets you define your own, it's your life, so it gets more integrated. I am encouraged. I see a lot of corporations now, and I'm like, God, with all these perks, like I may go back to corporate. But it's just really beautiful to see like how that's changed, and I applaud companies that do a lot of DEI because to me, working in corporate, there were not a lot of people who looked like me. But I did have a lot of mentors who were like, watch out for this or do this and whatnot. So I always felt very supported. But I did have, I had this boss and he would say like, I'm not going to look for who's the first car here and the last one here. And I told him, I said, well, if you did, you would see that it's my car. I said, but by Friday at 2, like I've given everything and I'm going to leave. And he was like, cool. Like, I agree. He's like, if you want to, and I just like being out early on Friday. It made me feel good. I wanted to miss traffic and get home. But that's work life integration, right? Like I just said it and my boss was like, cool. And there was never that push. Like, and I feel like corporations have really done a good job of doing that.
Mike, how your quality of life has changed ever since you left the education world?
I mean, drastically. I never imagined I'd be at a point where I can be involved in. I don't necessarily my kids' events, sporting events, plays. I get to see them on the weekends and I'm relaxed. I can exercise regularly. I'm not pulled into so many school functions where you're forced almost to have a drink or whatnot, and it's night and day. It's night and day. And I would attribute that largely to, the employers I've had that they recognize it. They, they, they do what they can to build that culture and those systems and structures because they know it's beneficial to the organization. And it's unfortunate that our educators don't have that.
The book concludes, I believe, indicating that the purpose of the book is not to encourage people to leave the profession,
right?
But to let them know that, listen, if you're unhappy doing what you are doing, you have options. Any final thoughts about to share with the viewers and listeners of the show?
My final thought, Nallely, you can end, is that when we talk about this, there's almost no other sector, no other job where you're made to feel guilty telling someone you should quit. It goes back to texting yourself as a friend or whatnot. Just the concept of like telling teachers it's okay to leave. It's almost like it's a sin. You're breaking some rule or commandment. And that's what you have to realize. Like that's ridiculous. And I have friends who have gone from school to school and they're still unhappy. Why are you still doing it? If it's not for you, leave. Find something else, and you do have options.
Yeah, and I would echo a lot of that, but to me, it's just understanding if you feel fulfilled, and if you are fulfilled, keep doing it. And sometimes, we are in careers, and they're going to be hard days, and good people have bad days, and a lot of times we take that for granted. As educators, I have so much respect. I have lots of teachers in my family. I have a principal in my family. And to me, like the heart and the devotion that comes with it, it takes a special kind of person to do that. So I love that, we have these type of people in the schools and there, and I loved every teacher my children have had. At the same time, I encourage people to know that it's not the end all be all, and that you wouldn't put someone through a toxic environment out of guilt. And so understanding that there are options, if you want to explore them, and maybe some people will read the book and say, it's not that bad here. You know, and some people say, yeah, and they'll be like, you know what, I can do this, and maybe some people will be inspired. But hopefully the goal was just to say like there's options and there's a world outside, and if you are doubting taking that leap, we can show you how.
Wow. It's been a pleasure having you in the
Oh,
show.
likewise,
I
Efrain.
learned so much.
Gracias.
I strongly advise for anyone. It's an awesome read. It's exhilarating. It keeps you engaged all the time. For people who are in the career or switching, when you need ideas, this book is truly a master class. Pencils down. Have a great evening, guys.
Thank you.
So much.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network.
Wrong video.
Thank you for listening to Wisdom and Productivity, the podcast of Dr. Efrain Martinez.
Chulo.
And I love that production. Chill out.